Hey, everybody, welcome to another edition of the Rising Tide Leadership Podcast, Identity and Influence Edition. My name is Mo, and I'll be handling the questions this morning for my good buddy, Dr. Lem Usita. What's up, man?
Let's go, man. Always great to be on this call with you. Always excited to break it down. And this one, I say this every time, but this one's a good one. It's another good one.
This is a good one. I'll tell you why, because you know what our mantra is, simplifying the complexities of your leadership journey. And today, on the forefront, it's going to seem like it's going to make your life harder, but it really is going to simplify everything. So I love it. Why don't you give us the 30-second elevator speech of what the name of this one is and why you wrote it?
Yeah, the leader as meaning maker, how leadership and interpretation without creating chaos. And so every organization goes through change, loss, growth, conflict. And there are times when the organization experiences these things. And if a leader fails to engage the interpretive space, meaning if the leader fails to get in front of his team and explain what's happening, explain how to feel, explain how we're moving forward, organizations, if they don't do that, your team and your organization will try to fill the spaces in with what they know. And as we know, in the executive team space, you have all the information, and not everybody has all that information on the team. And when you don't fill in those spaces and interpret for people, things can go sideways and they just start making stuff up, and that's a reflection on leadership. So, yeah, this has everything to do with leadership when you're not interpreting the chaos that's happening in your organization.
So when you say that every organization is a meaning-making system, what exactly do you mean? Break it down a little bit more for me, and why does it matter so much for leaders?
So every organization has its culture. They have language or terms that they use. They have a dress code. They have their way of being, like when to take breaks, like what, whether they can take people out to lunch and put it on the credit card. Like there's all kinds of idiosyncrasies with organizations that shape the culture. My definition for culture is a group of people in a way of being. And so since every organization has a culture, every organization has a way of meaning making within that culture. It's their way of interpreting and making sense of all that's happening in the organization. And so when there's change, when there's growth, when there's conflict, the meaning making system in the culture of that organization kicks in. And if you don't address it, and if you don't model it for your team, they're subconsciously asking, well, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for us? What does it mean for our future? And if you don't answer those questions, your team will fill the void with their own ideas, and you can kind of get sideways on things.
Yeah, like everything in what I do, this immediately makes me think of the DISC assessment that we use for our clients, because people aren't just receiving information, they're interpreting it through their personality, pace, fear, preferences. So the
Yeah,
way
is
that
it
a D personality sees something is way different than the way that an S personality. You could say the same thing to the same person, and it has completely different meaning. And you as
that's
the
right.
leader, you're responsible for that. So you and I, we've built our entire framework on the idea that people can approach communication and collaboration differently. And the message needs to lead to the same place, but from different parts of the team, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And part of the reason
And
why
I'm fired up.
part of the reason why I wrote this lesson was because I've messed up on this. You know what I mean? Unintentionally not address things or said too much in the wrong setting. And, people run with it. They take off because you're the leader. Yeah, man, this one hurts a little bit because I got lots of stories of how I messed up in this area.
Well, that actually leads me into the next question I had, which is, people can tolerate uncertainty on their teams, but, really the struggle is when there's a lack of clarity. And so when there's a lack of clarity, there's a lack of people knowing what the leader's intent is. So, how do we work through that?
So there's definitely the ability to tolerate uncertainty to a point, right? I don't think people can tolerate uncertainty, especially if it's a big thing, right? I write in the article that the leader's role is not merely to announce change, but to interpret it. Leaders function as translators between events and understanding, between data and direction. When leaders abdicate this responsibility, confusion fills a vacuum and confusion quickly becomes anxiety. So when a leader does not translate meaning for their team, the team fills in the gaps with their ideas. And as we know, the team has doesn't have as much information as the leader or the executive team. I've seen this work time and time again. That's why the leadership books keep saying over communicate what's happening. Ultimately, it's about creating safety for your team, and you want to create that kind of culture where the leader leads not just in the directives and the objectives. The leader also leads in safety. The leader also leads in this is how we should feel about this. It's a way to be authentic and real.
Yeah, Scotty and I were talking on the Rising Tide Leadership podcast a little bit ago. In fact, our last episode about how he is helping out a new leader, and he gave this new leader Nae Brown's book, one of her books,
Hmm.
and it made me think what you were just saying about something that she says, which is clear is kind, clear
Hmm.
is unkind. And
Yeah.
sometimes as leaders, we don't want to be clear because we think we're going to hurt somebody's feelings when in reality, our people just want to know
Right.
what's going on.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah.
No, that's really
So,
good.
yeah, you also make the point that when leaders don't engage the interpretive space, the organization creates its own narrative. Sounds dangerous. So,
Yeah.
what usually fills the vacuum when leadership stays silent?
Man, when leaders stay silent, the team definitely fills a vacuum with their own thoughts and their ideas. I've seen this happen in an organization where I was, one of the VPs, and I saw that like things come through and we didn't always address everything. And when that happens, the team just fills in the void with their ideas or what they think will happen, right? They'll try and resolve the conflict and the misunderstanding, but the team is always playing with limited information, limited resources, limited understanding. And I realized that when I first became an executive, there was only so much that I could communicate outside of that executive team, but we can still communicate all that's possible to create understanding and safety for our teams. In that situation, I was telling you, like, we just didn't communicate anything. And then what was happening was they were taking the past and they were taking things that happened way before we got there. And they were interpreting the situation in light of something that happened even before we got there as leaders. And so it really didn't help because they were working with limited information. And we didn't have a boss necessarily that thought about other people's feelings or really even cared about, how to communicate. This is how you should feel about the changes that are happening. They were just kind of communicating information and data, but they weren't really interpreting okay, this is how this should make you feel. Like, when we'll talk about that, like giving permission for people to feel a certain way so that, they know how to feel about something that's happening.
Yeah, and if we don't help them with that, they're going to fill in the blank with whatever matches their wiring.
Mhm.
So a more dominant personality is going to force a narrative. Somebody who's more cautious, like a C style, they're going to start catastrophizing everything.
Yeah. Step back.
People who are relational personalities, they're going to start reading every text, every tone, every subtext, and they're going to read into everything. And that's why silence is never neutral in a team setting.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
this really lines up, with the things that we've been doing to help people with their identity, to help leaders understand that, look, we need to actively construct what we want so that we can get rid of as much uncertainty as possible.
Yeah, no, that's really good because then if you know your style, you're able to communicate the message to all the other styles in the organization because there are
Right.
people with all of those styles in that organization and they're all going to need to hear like a different messaging to fit their style. No, that's really, really good.
Yeah, what's funny with our clients is we spend more time helping our clients understand how to relate with other styles than we do dealing with their own style
It's
because you
so
know your
true.
own style. Like
Yeah,
I
it's
already
so
know how
true.
to deal with people that are like me. I need to
Hmm.
understand how to deal with people who are not like me. And
Man,
if
that's
I
really
don't
good.
work at that, it's like a muscle. If I don't work that muscle, I just forget about it because I'm
Yeah,
selfish like everybody else. We're always thinking about us. So I really like that.
yeah, that's
So
really good.
next part, I wanted to talk about how leaders shape meaning. So if that's where we're getting to, that's what we want to do. You lay out three responsibilities for leaders: context, direction, permission. Why are these the three anchors that leaders need when helping people sense, change and make sense of what's going on?
Yeah, that's really good. The three things, context, direction, and permission, asks these questions. Context answers the question, why is this happening now? So, in light of change, growth, or conflict, giving people the context really matters. Direction answers the question, what does this mean for how we move ahead? So, not only does it give you context for where you're at, it gives you this is where we're headed in light of the change, growth, or conflict. And then permission answers the question, how should I feel and respond? You kind of give permission to your team for how they should feel in light of the context, direction, and what it is that's happening in them. Context provides sufficient framing to prevent misinterpretation. Direction includes what stays the same, what changes, and what matters most. But permission gives people a framework for processing change without escalating it. Like you just mentioned, they all have different styles, and to give them permission to feel what they feel in light of their style really, really creates that safety within the team. And that's what we want to create. The bottom line is to provide safety for that team in light of change and disruption so that everyone understands where we're at, where we're headed, and how we're feeling. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll tell you why I love this framework as a coach, both for athletics and for coaching people through business and life. Every good coach does this, right? So,
Hmm.
context tells me why this matters, direction tells me what to do next, and permission tells me I'm allowed to act like a human within the process.
Yeah,
I don't have to
that's
be
good.
rigid. And so, from the people side, that's huge because not everybody processes disruption in the same way, right?
That's really good. Yeah, exactly. And you're meeting people where they're at. Like you're creating that leadership culture where people are being seen, they're being heard, but then you're also creating safety for all of these different styles. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and when leaders create these environments where their people can process, can ask questions, they can stay engaged and not be afraid, then you're going to start to see a sea change in your organization and people are going to want to be a part of the process because
Yeah.
you're inviting them into the process. I really appreciated your
Yeah.
thoughts on that, and me, I'm a systems guy. Give me the
Yeah.
system and then I'll work it in to the way that I do things. And for the YouTube audience, just so you know, I'm not great at systems because I want to be. I'm great at systems because I need to be. Somebody with my personality, I don't
Yeah.
do that well. I don't like checklists. I don't like to write these things down but I have to,
Right.
and it makes
Right.
my life better. And for my team, they appreciate it. And even if they don't appreciate it, they can appreciate it because they know that I'm working to get it done. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I really
And
like
here we
that
are.
that framework.
And here we are just giving it to you, man. Like here's the framework. Here's the three things to ask. Yeah.
It's
The
yeah.
good stuff.
Ask these questions. Ask these questions to the men and women who mentor you, who coach you in life. So, and if you don't have anybody, that's why we're here. You also describe a meaning making cycle: event recognition, interpretive framing, a directional translation, and emotional regulation. Now, those are all a lot of, crazy words. Why is it important that leaders move through all four of these steps? And how can somebody break this down without having to think about it like this in their daily leadership, style?
Yeah, the more you do this, the more natural it'll become. But we're just kind of laying it out for people so that they can see what that process looked like. Meaning making cycle simply is this. Event recognition is just naming what happened without defensiveness, whether it was growth, a conflict, or some kind of change. To be able to name it just really helps the team. And then you provide the interpretive framing. You explain why this matters. This thing happened and then this is why it matters to us. And to get that from the leader is going to be key for the organization. And then the directional translation is to clarify the implications. When you're able to say this is what's going to happen in light of this change, it's not going to freak people out. I mean, it might freak people out, but really it's gonna help them to see, okay, the leader understands what we're doing and they understand the implications of this growth and change and conflict. And then the emotional regulation piece is modeling a grounded response. Like when you as a leader, you're not freaking out, they're not going to be freaking out because they're following you. They're going to understand we don't have to freak out because our leader's freaking out. He totally understands what's happening here. You model the appropriate response for your team. You help them to process and stay safe during the change, growth, or conflict. And being able to communicate that for your team is going to help your team so much.
Yeah, if you skip these steps, leaders, your people are going to feel it. If a leader jumps straight into action without naming the reality, people
Right.
are going to feel
Right.
rushed. If you name the reality but you never frame it, people are going to feel lost. If
Yep.
they give direction without emotional steadiness, people are gonna they're gonna comply outwardly, but inwardly they're gonna be panicking. They might
Yeah.
not tell you,
Yeah.
but
That's
that's
good.
how they're gonna feel. And so
That's really
what I've
good.
learned from our conversations is that's where identity and maturity really shows up in leadership
Mhm.
because, we need to help our leaders understand that they have to have and give a plausible map of what's happening in order so that they can act coherently and help their team from one step to another.
That's so good, man. And I love that it's broken
Yeah,
down so easily for anyone to follow.
it really is. And again, leaders, like this is not these lessons are not easy, but they are simplified. So, however you can remember these steps, for instance, you got to figure that out so that you can remember them when you are helping your team. You don't have to tell them, okay, well, now, I want to talk to you about interpretive framing. That's not the way you lead your team,
Yeah.
right? I want to help you with emotional regulation. Nobody wants to hear that. What they want is for you to help them understand what they're doing, even if they don't know the names for it. But that's your job as the leader. So, last question. There's a leader out there listening today that is thinking, "Gosh, I got to get practical with this." So,
Mhm.
what are some ways for them to shape meaning without over-explaining, oversharing, accidentally creating more chaos when they should really be helping the situation?
If you're on a team and you're the leader on the team, there will be change, there will be disruption, there'll be conflicts that come up. But before communicating any major change, you got to ask yourself these questions. What are people most likely to misunderstand? What assumptions might they make? What story do I want to prevent from forming? You address those things first and you address those things in the way that you communicate what's happening, right? People, if you could put yourself in the shoes of your team, you'll be able to answer a lot of their questions in the way that you communicate what's happening. And then you structure key messages as because this is happening, this is how we are responding. That simple structure of because this is happening, therefore this is how we respond really gives them context and it builds coherence and trust for your team. And then repeat meaning, not
Yeah.
just information people need to hear to to interpret more than once. Repeat the why more than the what, because then it becomes a part of the conversation and then it frames all of their thoughts. If you can constantly communicate and repeat the why, it's going to frame, where they go in their ideas. And then key for leaders is to watch internal narratives, like pay attention to hallway conversations, side comments, and emotional cues. These reveal the where meaning making has failed, right? And then gently correct, but do so promptly. Don't let it slide. Like uh, pay attention to people are saying informally. That's going to tell you a lot about how your teams feel. And then you can build meaning making into your leadership culture by training your senior leaders and managers to translate decisions for their teams and then reinforce context and direction. And then to escalate confusion early rather than letting it fester. Man, I have seen this happen in organizations and the leaders saying, wow, they just don't get it, and I'm like, they don't get it because
Yeah.
you haven't communicated it. You got to keep communicating it. You got to create that leadership culture and you got to keep training up your managers, your VPs, and your senior leaders to constantly communicate that why, not just the what. Meaning making should not be centralized, it should be distributed to everybody. That way, everyone is on the same page and communicating the same things. Leaders don't merely lead organizations, they lead the interpretations of the things happening in the organization. The stories people tell themselves about what's happening will shape morale, behavior, and trust long before the decision fades. So Leaders who embrace their role as meaning makers create cultures that are resilient, aligned, and capable of navigating complexity without fragmentation. And these are the steps to do it. They're pretty simple to explain, but they're really hard to execute.
Well, yeah, and what I think when I hear all that is, look, as a leader, you can't just go dumping every thought onto your team that comes out of your head.
Hmm.
Good leaders don't just vent in public and call it transparency. They translate. They say, "Here's what's happening." They explain it. Tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them what you tell them, and then tell them what you told them. Tell them why it matters. Help them know what they're doing and why they're doing it and what they're doing next. Give clarity throughout the process because that clarity is going to help the different personalities on your team. And there's
A
everybody's got a different personality.
100%.
But
Yeah.
it's gonna help all your people stay connected, and they're not gonna get flooded. Think of that word, flooded. You don't want your
Yeah.
people to get flooded with the bad stuff. You wanna filter it out so that they only get the good stuff. So,
Yeah.
final thoughts for you before we leave.
Man, this is something that every leader needs to focus on. And there aren't, like the leadership books that we read cover so many wonderful things. But I don't know that I've read this anywhere. You know what I mean? Like this is just like a little nuance and a little thing that I've experienced because of bad leadership that I've used or have been a part of. And so, leaders pay attention to being the meaning maker in your organization. Create that culture where people understand and interpret in light of mission, vision, and values. Like over communicate that so that people only think and interpret in light of that. And that takes a lot of work to do. But
Yeah,
just know that like the meaning making in your culture, your leadership culture lies and rests on the leader.
yeah. Man, I love it. So, leaders, remember, don't just manage what happens. It's important to help your team,
Yeah.
do those management tasks, and hopefully you get a team with you, but if it's just you, then it's important, right? But if you want to be a great leader, you need to help people understand what it means. As Dr. Lim was talking about, the why. A lot of people don't like that term, the why. I don't know. I don't know why they don't like that. I think it's great. Simon Sinek's been talking about it for a long time, and I love it because I think it helps at least the people that are our clients. So, leaders, that's just a little bit of free chicken for you to go out, help your people understand meaning, which will help them make decisions. It'll make your life a lot easier. So, with that,
So good.
appreciate you, man. Always good to have you here, Dr. Lem. For our audience, don't forget to sign up for our newsletter at RTCLC. We give you all the good stuff. Like, subscribe, share this with somebody who needs to hear it, and we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot, brother.
Thank you so much.